Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Darin Fisher, Security Tools Manager for InfluxData, and thank you for taking the time to hear what security team's up to. I'd like to start off a little bit about my background. I started here a few months back, early January, and prior to that, I've had a varied career from tech support to director of security. I've worked for software companies, ISPs, telcos, banks, even started, built, and sold a couple companies along the way. I worked in development, management, mostly operations. 85% of my time has been spent in operations. Love it there. It's my bread and butter. Throughout all of this, data processing has been a constant. Data processing and monitoring. And with that, I've developed a philosophy of it's all just data. We either want to move it better, faster, store it, retrieve it, search it, analyze it, present it, and do that all over again, but better. It's all just data. It's easy. Keep it simple. So now I get to take all of this experience and knowledge and wrap it all together, and I've been given the opportunity to develop security products with it. Part of my role here is as security tools manager, is to develop security products, but it's also to do IT. Okay, I don't like that part. Back up just a few seconds. And now you get to wrap all this experience together and help develop security products with it. And my role here as security tools manager is twofold. One is typical IT security, audits, analysis, etc. In fact, we just finished up our SOC 2 audit. Thank you. That was a fun pain in the butt, but very well worth it. We found a few areas that we were, kind of missing or didn't quite have the controls we needed in place. So it was really good experience with that. Brought the whole team together. And then the other exciting part about the role is the product manager for security tools. I've never done product management before, and I'm very excited about this. So let's see. So why are we building another security solution? There's so many out there. We had to ask ourselves that. Why even consider that? Well, Nate Fick put it very well, that the first step you take in finding anomalies and behavior in devices and the network is to organize the data into a collection of time series events. So why not just do that to begin with? There's a lot of noise out there. But security problems in general are better analyzed as a time series of events. They definitely help clarify context. You get to understand your past and how it affects the future. You get to compare your future to what's happened in the past. Some things that look like anomalies aren't. Some things that look normal are not. So this is the great place to start with. Right now, most of the security solutions out there are generally not using this context. They're not in this type of scenario. They're looking at it as it's coming through, but not putting the history in context. So we want to take all this noise that's made a lot of these tools ineffectual and break them down into simple metrics. And by doing so, and by utilizing modern tooling, we're also able to collect from multiple sources for better pattern expectations. And the security tools today don't have a lot of direct SaaS access monitoring or SaaS data correlations. So we want to add that capability in there. And by combining all of this and creating the correlation, pulling the activity from all the separate services, we can observe this in a single picture. And putting this picture together and the tooling behind it using modern CI/CD pipelines, architectures, et cetera, we use our built-in mechanisms for monitoring the entire pipeline itself. We get an extra bonus out of that. So we're going to be building these with our InfluxDB platform. When I was interviewing, my boss was really excited about the capability to build our own security tools on top of our own platform. And when I heard that the first time, it immediately caught my attention because that's perfect. Instead of having to search for all the different tools, analyze different products, et cetera, we get to build what we need. And if our tools don't do what they need, we can change them. It's open source. It's great. We've got a templating system. So I can build everything up, get a pretty picture, hit a button, and I've got a template that I can help distribute to everybody. InfluxDB time series data implementations in general have a very interesting role to play in naturally storing events in a time series. We correlate the multiple assets, and it takes a lot of that manual work out of the forensics and management workflows for security. And with all of this, we're going to start off by building securities to enhance our own security posture. So what are we doing? We've started building some simple security tools to meet our own needs, and we'll take it, we'll talk about that in just a minute. Like I mentioned before, we were talking about building security tools, looking at what we need, what we can do, what the capabilities are, what's missing, what's not missing, the normal product. How do you design a product? And one thing we did is we had so many different ideas, so many things that we get to do that we had to really narrow our focus because we could have just spun our wheels indefinitely. And it's like, let's keep this simple. Albert Einstein put it very well. Let's keep it simple, but no simpler. Or keep it as simple as possible, but no simpler. And that's always stuck with me for a long time because I've had a bad habit of either over-engineering or trying to just simplify everything to the nth degree. And it doesn't need to be. In fact, I've simplified things a couple times in the past so much that I backed myself into a corner and had to almost start over. Not a good thing. So what are we going to do? We're going to build some tools to keep ourselves safe, increase our own security posture, and keeping in mind that these security tools can help our customers, especially with our templating system. So we're going to share these to start with. And then we've got great ideas coming in from the community and we want more. How can we help you? What are your pain points? What's going to be the most useful for you? So with all of the monitoring, all the noise, all the ideas, we need to get focused. So the first thing we're going to do is determine what to watch. We've got such a large infrastructure, or such a large modern infrastructure. We're a SaaS first company. We use over 100 separate providers. It gets excited talking about all this. And we're a SaaS provider ourselves. So our attack service with our modern day pipeline is continually changing. I've seen it change up to 20 times a day. In the past, in other companies, I've seen 100. I even was at one place we did 1,000 in a day. That gives a very complicated but interesting attack surface to watch. And by taking this information, running it through keeping it in a time series, building up the anomalies, building the history, we can derive a lot of information from that trending and correlation. So we're going to start looking initially for anomalies. So what are we going to see? Where are we going to look for these to start with? We look for compromised accounts or possibility of compromised accounts by watching just the basic access activity and authentication activity. Compromised accounts are the #1 cause of security breaches. So it's a great place to start. We can watch increased failure rates and do some cardinality between the source address and the accounts. If you see somebody logging in from the East Coast and the West Coast within 5 minutes, possibility of a good compromise there. Got to be careful though, because most ISPs nowadays have your IP address will change. So got to keep that in mind when we're looking at this. And then also look at our cloud access activity. That can give us a lot of information, increased resource utilization, simple access changes. our network changes as a port opened up. And then a newer one that we've noticed is increase in costs. Watch your billing activity. You may not see a failure rate. You may not see an increase in resource utilization that's out of your norm or out of your boundaries. Uh, Failure rates may not be there, but if they're utilizing your resources, the costs are going to go up. Cloud providers today have great billing services, and let's take advantage of those. And at my previous job, I got to build a very high volume event monitoring service. And that led us into how are we going to, with all of this information coming in, how are we watching? Are we setting boundaries? And a lot of times I've used just static thresholds, 80% of disk space, 75% of memory, 50% of network bandwidth, etc. It turns into a whack-a-mole game. It's happened pretty much every time. You either miss something because the thresholds aren't set low enough, or you're getting too much noise because they're set too low, et cetera, et cetera. So now that we've got this everything in a time series of events, we can look at the history and we see what it should be. Maybe 80%, 80 to 85% is normal, and that's where we're okay with. But maybe that's, even if it's normal, what happens when it changes? And what happens during the time of day? Let's look at hour over hour from yesterday to today, or last week even. Weekends are different than weekdays. Holidays are different. So we can watch these comparisons and hopefully get some real information out of there and not have to page, well, me, for instance, for something that's not relevant. Rolling averages with deviations creates great threshold manageability. And it can change itself. It'll grow with your business as it grows. Also, your SRE teams, your operations teams can use it for, sorry, I lost the word there. Where did the word go? Capacity planning, thank you. So there's a lot of usefulness here, not just in the security realm. We also get to do continuous auditing. I think I mentioned we got through our SOC 2 audit, and one of the controls we were missing were regular audits of our accounts across our entire attack surface. And we were doing them, but they were ad hoc and just usually when we needed to. So we can use this to automate that. We can watch our SaaS activity, we can watch our SaaS accounts and make sure that we don't leave someone out or leave someone in that shouldn't be there. Watch for public address changes that shouldn't be occurring. Watch for ports to open that shouldn't be open anymore. You can just keep that model going continuously instead of periodically. And watch our state of security controls. I don't like manual tasks, so I want to automate this as much as possible. Are we maintaining a consistent posture in a continually changing surface? And what are we looking at throughout all of this? Authentication activity, authentication functionality. Is your authentication function actually working, and we're just letting the world in? What are our account and source location cardinality changes? Multi-SaaS correlation across the board. Changes to the attack surface, state changes, service costs increased, and simple SSL validations. Plus so much more, but this is where we're starting with. So how are we going to build this? Well, we're going to use our own tools, our own platform to start with. We've got Telegraph, hundreds of plugins, great utility. InfluxDB with the Flux language also has some capabilities to go out and pull information in. If you've got a CSV file, you want it as is, pull it directly in. You've got an API that's got a very simple JSON or even line protocol output. Call it directly with Influx. Don't worry about an intermediary. When we find things that we don't have the capability for yet, and it's going to take too much, or it doesn't fit our paradigm to put into the product, use modern day functions as a service. Also makes sense when you've got regular checks that aren't occurring very frequently. Let's say you want to watch SSL certificates. You only need to check those once a day. And you'll know where you're at. So why run a VM or a service 24/7 if you're only looking at 24 units? And we're going to utilize the provider's APIs as much as possible. And then of course, raw log files. I don't think that'll ever end. They give you tons of information. It's an easy place to dump debug data. So we're always going to be looking at that. And we'll use our own DB cloud for storage and analysis. Performance is there. Analysis is there. Perfect. So what have we built so far? We have built a couple tools so far. The first one we built is a simple endpoint monitoring. This one was a fun one, my first use of templating. So creating the templates was the easy part. Coming up with what to watch was easy also, except for narrowing it down. There's so many things we can watch traffic-wise on there. So we decided to focus just on general availability as a security concern, authentication, availability, and functionality, and then certificate status. Just keep it very simple. The templates, like I mentioned, the templating process was a joy to learn. The engineers are continually improving this. And once I got all of this put together, the pretty layout, clicked a couple buttons, the template was created. Jumped through a couple little hoops to make sure that my I's were dotted and my T's were crossed. Everything looked good. Checked it in, made a pull request, went through the process. Whoop. Now we have it in our community templates. Easy. The next thing I've been working on has been a authentication anomaly monitoring. Most providers out there do not give this information out. It's not even accessible via API. We'll talk about that in a minute. It's one of our bumps in the road. G Suite or Google Workplace does. They have very good information there. So that's where we started. We're looking for authentication failure spikes and source address cardinality across the board. We're also adding some more granular pieces with the tokens, OAuth, JWT, et cetera, from there to fill in that information. We can audit how many single sign-on apps are being used, et cetera. Don't have a template for this yet. We're internally using this, but haven't taken to the templating stage yet, primarily because of the data collection. This is a little bit more difficult one. I think I may have found a simpler method, but we'll see when I get working through that. As you can see, currently we're at about 107 unique accounts for the last 7 days. We've had 188 attempts with 44 failures. We're at about 1.3 on the cardinality, which isn't bad. I expect a 2 to 3 on there, primarily due to ISPs. I'll be adding the geotagging in here also to help with some of that. So what are we going to work on next? Like I mentioned, multi-SaaS correlation. We're adding GitHub into the mix. That'll give us multiple accounts, plus it'll give us a lot of auditing capabilities. I want to start looking at network changes, not only from, I'd say, a NetStat, but from an external scanning point of view. Let's scan that every half an hour just to see if a new port's been opened up or not. Multi-SaaS account auditing. It's a great one for IT and for HR. We're going to make sure that verify across all of our SaaS accounts that accounts have been terminated when they need to be terminated. Ingress activity tracking. This is going to show us, to start with, it's going to give us just some basic anomaly detection information. Are we seeing the same account from multiple regions, multiple geographic locations, et cetera? Plus, it allows us to create some really good, fun geographic usage observability, which is always fun to create those pretty pictures for everybody. I like to see where all of our business is coming from, where we're heavy, where we're not, and entertaining that way. And then I mentioned previously we've run into some bumps in the road. You always will. That's why we're doing what we do, is to overcome these hurdles. A couple of them have been primarily due to lack of information, which is a tough one to overcome when they're not allowing us to grab that. We're dealing with so many different providers, different APIs, different context. We need to correlate this information. So we also need normalized fields. We don't expect everybody to follow a certain standard, but we need to be able to combine these so we know which accounts are tied to which services for auditing, anomaly detection, etc. Our visibility. What are actually good triggers? I talked a little bit about using static thresholds, and we'll be able to use boundaries or historical information to help create those triggers better. But some of them just need to be static. And then what other indicators are using? Provider billing services, I mentioned. That's one we just recently starting incorporating into our visibility. On our data collection methods, not everybody uses APIs or makes APIs readily available. So we've got to find other methods. Some of them do have log dumps, etc. We're struggling on that one. And then deriving state for faster. So much information is coming in and from different sources that we need to be able to roll that up. Rolling up in the sense of usage, context, and say network usage, bandwidth, etc. makes sense. But in say failed logins, how do you summarize those without losing context? Excuse me. Pardon me. A little bug in my throat there. So where was I here? Okay. Yeah, because we're dealing with all these different providers and the context. Sorry, skip over to, okay, I was rolling up. Yeah, so how do you do login failures into a summary? If you've got one or two, statistically, that will not make any sense. So we've got to find better methods for consolidating this data. Because the one size fits all approach just doesn't work, obviously, but we're working on that. So a lot of data, correlating, summarizing, and general just consolidation of this data is needed. And we're working on that. It's great. So what else do we need? This is where I'm going to talk a little bit more about what's missing and put myself on a bit of a soapbox, I guess. Cloud-based software services we need to provide. We're not doing it either yet. We're in the midst of adding this, but most providers just don't give you access to that information. In the past, we've been able to just look at our log files. Yeah, it took some time to maybe fish the right data out to get the performance right, but at least we had the information. We could figure out how to get it and do something with it. But most providers so far, I want to say like 80%, almost 90% of them not available. And the ones that do, you don't even have a basic, sometimes you don't even have basic information. You have to pay just to get that. And I understand the costs involved. We're working on that also. So I get that, but we need to provide at least some basic low-level information so I can at least test this. I can't even go out and test that information without having to pay for that upgraded service. And if you want more details, etc., pay for the service. That's what it's there for. Then the ability to create service accounts. A lot more companies have this. Providers are getting better about it, but still we've got too many of them that you're going to have admin access. And so I've got these set of admin credentials. Well, we haven't gotten that point, but sitting out there, a lot of companies, I know in the past I've done this, you've got admin credentials sitting out there in clear text files. And hopefully you protect your network and your systems well enough to mitigate that. But still, it just never makes you feel comfortable doing that. A lot of companies, like I said, are doing this, especially for some read-only role-based accounts. So, okay, off my soapbox. So thank you, everybody. Hopefully this was some good information. Talked about our time series. It's great use for this context. And we're starting off with a SaaS account activity and simple endpoint observation, and then we're just build better audit tools. That's our next step here. We want to make sure everything's visible as much as possible, and then build our tools off of that. We've got the history to start looking at anomalies, what's normal, what's not. But to do this and do it well, we need some better access to that audit. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out on Slack. I'm Darin on the InfluxDB community. Thank you again. Bye.